Hi again then guys, and welcome to the first ever car review on this channel for Forza Motorsport 7. Now this series is going to be very big. We're going to be predominantly featuring some of the most significant newer cars on the game, or in some cases cars which have maybe been featured on Forza in the past but have now returned, such as this one, or cars which may be DLC in the past, such as on the Horizon games, but are now in the game as standard, so many people may not have driven them before. So, what better way to kick off a series like this than with a returning, familiar and very popular face, in particular the Porsche 911 GT1 Street version. Now the Street version used to be on Forza, but as far as I can remember it wasn't on Forza 5, I know it isn't on Forza 6, the racing version was, and a vehicle like this, in a similar way to the Mercedes CLK GTR road car, has one very specific advantage in its arsenal, and that is how fast it is for a street car specifically, because it's not difficult for a race car to be fast, but when you're in road-only lobbies, this is an invaluable weapon, as I said, in a similar way to the CLK GTR and also the Nissan R390 road car, and also the Lotus Elise GT1, but unfortunately that isn't featured on the game. In fact, there aren't many games which do feature that. Now this car has interesting numbers when you first get it, because it has a quoted price of 1.25 million credits, which makes it one of the more expensive cars in the game, especially if you're talking road cars. However, you don't need to buy it. Even when you get to the tier that this car is in, which is super rare, it's still not a car which you actually need to buy, because you can win it in career mode, specifically in a one-make race event featuring this car at Silverstone, and it's definitely an event which I would recommend taking part in, because this car is definitely worth winning. Now the numbers that the car has, specifically power, torque, weight, that kind of thing, when you first get it, seem inaccurate to real life, but it's because, as with a lot of cars on Forza 7, they come pre-tuned for a certain class level. In the case of this car, it comes pre-tuned to R900, with specs that closely resemble the racing version of the GT1 rather than the road car. But when you remove those specs, you can find out where the car really sits and what you've got to work with as a base. Now in the case of this car, you're looking at the S-Class, pretty high, 776 in the S-Class, and in terms of power and torque, it's not earth-shattering, but a lot of the cars from this GT1 homologation style era didn't actually need insane amounts of power to get the job done. Because unlike a traditional supercar, even a modern one, they're not predominantly about straight line speed. They're more about the all-round package. They tend to do somewhere around 200 miles per hour, 0 to 60 in somewhere around 3.5 seconds, but it's also about the handling, the cornering speed. Being as it is realistically a race car for the road, it has that huge advantage at its disposal, which a typical supercar just, well, doesn't have. A normal supercar, even something like a Carrera GT, would struggle to match this vehicle around the track for sheer cornering ability. Now you're looking at 536 horsepower, 442 pound-feet of torque. So they're good enough numbers, definitely, especially for the 90s. Supercars didn't have anywhere near the power that they have now, generally speaking. The weight is also very low when you compare it to modern machines. 1,200 kilos is very impressive, and that's easily lighter than pretty much any supercar on the market now. Now the horsepower per tonne doesn't sound remarkable, it's 447, but you've got to bear in mind that all of these numbers are stock, straight out of the crate stock. So you've got this fantastic base canvas, if you will, to work with. So the question is, of course, how does a car like this actually perform? Well, as you'd assume, it's very fast, but at the same time it's not necessarily a vehicle which is the most adept on tracks which require top-end speed. As you can see here at the Le Mans, it's certainly got straight line speed, but this version that I'm driving is in its tuned form, with, in effect, 911 GT1 race car specs rather than the road car. So that isn't entirely an accurate thing to expect of the car, unless of course you leave it at that tuning level. Overall, the handling is not necessarily beginner friendly in a traditional sense. It's a little slippery, a little squirrely, but compared to even some other supercars, newer ones perhaps, it's actually very forgiving. And one of the main differences, I would say, between this 911 GT1 and one of its main rivals, the Mercedes CLK GTR, is that the Porsche has a smoother approach to the way it delivers its performance, and in particular with its handling, than the Mercedes does. The Mercedes is a little twitchier and a little sharper, maybe a bit more aggressive, I would say, whereas the 911 GT1 is smoother, certainly still very quick, but more beginner friendly, I would say, than the CLK GTR. Which of them is the faster? Well, of course, that'll depend on the track, the driver, the tuning, but they're certainly fantastic rivals. And the Nissan tends to be a little bit forgotten in the mix, but the R390 is also a great rival, of course, for them both. This car is a vehicle which is definitely worth your time as far as Forza 7 goes, because not only is it a great returning face, which we're very happy to see back, I know some of you guys in particular will be, but also more than that, it's not just a collector's piece. And even if you paid out the money to get it, it would be worth it. But that isn't the case. The value is even better because of the fact that you can straight up win the car, and it's also relatively early on in the game that you can do so. So if you are planning to play Forza 7, this is definitely a highlight vehicle from career mode to look out for because of how quickly you can get your hands on it. And overall, if you are a 911 GT1 fan, and even for someone like me who isn't the biggest of Porsche fans, you definitely won't be disappointed by this car. It's a monster, it's one of the best street performance cars in the game, and it's certainly worth a look. But that's it overall for this particular pick. You can check out more reviews for Forza 7 as they come out on this channel, of course, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.